During the mid-Joseon dynasty, a time heavily burdened by rigid social codes and political unrest, there lived a nobleman named Lee Deok-chun. He was a minister of immense virtue and reputation, a man whose word carried the weight of iron. Yet, despite his high standing, the true turning point of his family's destiny arrived not through a royal decree, but on the footsteps of a mysterious wanderer. One quiet afternoon, an elderly man named Master Pak crossed the threshold of the Yi estate. He was a Taoist immortal disguised as a common sage, yet he possessed an ethereal presence that immediately commanded respect. Minister Yi, recognizing the visitor's profound spiritual depth, welcomed him with the utmost courtesy. Over bowls of warm tea, the two men conversed not of mundane politics, but of the hidden laws of the cosmos. Intrigued and deeply moved by Minister Yi's nobility, Master Pak made a sudden, grave proposal. He offered his own daughter in marriage to Minister Yi's prized son, Yi Sebek, a young man renowned for his striking looks and brilliant mind. Believing that a union arranged by such a divine sage must be dictated by heaven itself, Minister Yi accepted without hesitation. The covenant was sealed in private, bound by honor and the absolute authority of a father's word. Months dissolved into seasons, and the day of the grand wedding finally approached. Within the walls of the Yi household, anticipation hung thick in the air. Yi Sebek, the groom, possessed the soaring ambition of a young scholar destined for greatness. He and his mother naturally assumed that the daughter of a mysterious immortal would possess a beauty that mirrored the heavens, a bride whose grace would elevate their noble lineage. When the bridal procession finally arrived, it was grand and meticulous, cloaked in the traditional crimson and indigo of Joseon nobility. The bride remained hidden behind the heavy silk curtains of her palanquin, a silent enigma. Yet, a strange, suffocating silence seemed to follow her every step into the courtyard, as if the air itself grew cold in her presence. The traditional ceremony proceeded with solemn rigidity. The vows were made, and the couple retreated to the bridal chamber for the final fateful ritual, the lifting of the veil. It was in that dim, candlelit room that the illusions of the Yi family were violently shattered. As the heavy headpiece was removed, the true visage of Lady Pak was revealed to her new husband. She was not a celestial beauty. She was a creature of profound deformity. Her skin was a chaotic tapestry of dark, angry pockmarks and jagged scars. Her features were severely distorted, her frame hunched and unnaturally bloated, and an odor of decay seemed to linger faintly around her garments. It was an appearance so intensely grotesque that it defied the very notion of a noble bride. Yi Sebek froze, his gaze paralyzed by a volatile mixture of shock and visceral revulsion. The romantic expectations of his youth died instantly in that suffocating room. He looked at her not with compassion, but with the cold, stinging resentment of a man who felt utterly betrayed by his own father's promise. The reaction of the household was swift and unforgiving. When Minister Yi's wife beheld her new daughter-in-law, her shock quickly curdled into bitter wrath. She lamented aloud that this monstrous woman would bring eternal shame to their prestigious name and ruin her son's bright future. The servants whispered in dark corners, averting their eyes whenever the new bride passed. Only Minister Yi remained steadfast, refusing to break the sacred oath he had made to Master Pak. He commanded his family to treat Lady Pak with the dignity befitted of a wife, but his authority could not govern the human heart. Yi Sebek utterly refused to share a bed with his bride. He denied her his warmth, his conversation, and his gaze. From that very first night, Lady Pak was cast into a state of psychological exile within her own home. She became a ghost moving through the estate, enveloped in a crushing, unyielding loneliness. Yet, despite the cruelty of the silence that surrounded her, Lady Pak neither wept nor protested. She merely endured, her brilliant, hidden mind waiting in the shadows for the long winter of her fate to pass. As the days bled into weeks, the atmosphere within the Yi estate grew increasingly hostile. Lady Pak quickly realized that her very presence was viewed as a stain upon the family's noble reputation. To preserve what little peace remained, and to shield herself from the venomous glares of her mother-in-law, she made a silent, deliberate choice. She requested permission to retreat to the furthest, most neglected corner of the estate's rear garden. There, a small, austere cottage was erected. She gave this solitary refuge a name, Piwadong, the pavilion built to avoid misfortune and cultivate peace. Within these quiet walls, isolated from the world, Lady Pak immersed herself in spinning silk and practicing ancient esoteric arts. Her only companion was her loyal maid, Kaiwa, who possessed the rare wisdom to see past her mistress's grotesque exterior into the blinding brilliance of her soul. Together, they lived like ghosts in a forgotten sanctuary, surrounded by a family that wished only to forget they existed. Though cast away like an unwanted shadow, Lady Pak's loyalty to her new family never wavered. Her husband, Yi Si-baek, was preparing for the state civil service examination, a crucial event that would determine his political future and the survival of his lineage. Fueled by ambition and the desire to escape his domestic shame, he studied until his eyes grew dim, yet true brilliance eluded him. Aware of his silent struggle, Lady Pak set to work in the dead of night. Using threads that seemed spun from moonlight and divine foresight, she embroidered a magnificent scholar's robe, weaving protective seals and intellectual clarity into every intricate stitch. She sent the garment to her husband through her maid, along with a specially prepared inkstone of mystical origin. Though Yi Si-baek wore the robe with immense reluctance, the moment he entered the palace courtyard, a profound aura of wisdom enveloped him. His brush moved across the parchment with supernatural eloquence, addressing the king's complex prompts with flawless precision. He passed the examination with the highest honors in the kingdom. The Yi household erupted in grand celebration, completely blind to the fact that the true architect of their sudden glory sat alone in the dark garden, weaving in silence. Sometime later, a traveling horse merchant arrived at the gates of the estate, leading a creature that drew nothing but laughter and scorn from the family grooms. It was a wretched, skeletal animal, its ribs pressing sharply against a dull, mangled coat. It seemed steps away from death. Yet, gazing through the lattice window of Pyeongdang, Lady Pak recognized what the untrained eyes of men could not see: the sacred markings of a heavenly stallion, a cholima capable of traversing 1,000 li in a single day. She commanded Kaiwa to purchase the pathetic beast, paying a sum that the household deemed utter madness. For months, under Lady Pak's meticulous and mystical direction, the horse was fed a precise diet of specially boiled grains and washed in enchanted waters. Slowly, a miraculous transformation occurred. The skeletal frame expanded into powerful, muscled contours, its dull coat ignited with a velvet sheen, and its eyes burned with celestial fire. It became a majestic warhorse of incomparable worth, a treasure fit for an emperor. Yet, the family merely attributed the miracle to bizarre, unexplainable luck, continuing to mock the eccentric lady who spent her days tending to beasts and shadows. Despite the immense wealth, prestige, and hidden protection Lady Pak continuously channeled into the Yi lineage, the emotional frost within the estate did not thaw. Yi Si-baek, now a rising star in the royal court, grew even more detached, his burning pride refusing to let him acknowledge any connection to the deformed woman in the backyard. His mother continued her bitter complaints, viewing Lady Pak's unnatural insights not as a blessing, but as an unsettling, witchcraft-like curse. Through it all, Lady Pak remained an unmoving anchor of stoicism. She did not seek their praise, nor did she falter under their disdain. She understood that her current isolation was merely a crucible, a temporary period of confinement and preparation before the chaotic tides of history would rise, demanding her true awakening. 3 long, agonizing years had drifted past since the night of the ill-fated wedding. For 3 winters, Lady Pak had endured the freezing isolation of Pyeongdang, never once uttering a word of resentment or shedding a tear of self-pity. She had borne the crushing weight of her family's scorn with the dignity of a monarch in exile. Then, on a day when the bitter winter winds began to yield to the first whispers of spring, a familiar figure appeared at the gates of the Yi estate. It was Master Pak, the Taoist sage. He requested an audience with Minister Yi, who received his old friend with a heart heavy with unspoken apologies. But the sage merely smiled, a profound tranquility radiating from his eyes. He informed the minister that his daughter's presence in this household had been governed by a celestial decree. Her grotesque appearance, he explained, was not a curse of nature, but a heavy karmic debt, a spiritual trial she was destined to suffer for a designated period. Now, the hours of her tribulation had expired, and the time had come to reveal the truth. With the minister's blessing, Master Pak retreated to the secluded confines of Pyeongdang, where his daughter awaited him. The air inside the cottage grew warm, vibrating with an unseen divine energy. Under the sage's mystical guidance, a supernatural ritual commenced. Slowly, the coarse, distorted outer layer of Lady Pak's skin began to loosen. It split apart like the husk of a seed that had finally matured in the dark earth. As the old, scarred visage dissolved away, it revealed a transformation that defied mortal imagination. Emerging from the grotesque shell was a woman of incomparable, breathtaking beauty. Her skin possessed the flawless, luminous quality of fine white jade. Her eyes held the depth and clarity of starlight, and her posture radiated an innate, regal grace. The foul odor of decay that had once clung to her was replaced by a subtle, enchanting fragrance of celestial orchids. She stood no longer as a creature of revulsion, but as an immortal spirit walking among men. When Master Pak departed back into the mountains, leaving his daughter fully unveiled, word of the miracle swept through the estate like wildfire. Yi Se-baek, summoned by his father, walked toward Pyeongdang with a mind tangled in disbelief and deep apprehension. As he stepped across the threshold, his breath caught in his throat. Standing in the center of the humble cottage was a lady whose grace eclipsed any woman he had ever beheld in the royal court. When she turned her gaze toward him, a gaze entirely devoid of malice, yet sharp with profound wisdom, Yi Se-baek was struck by a devastating wave of shame. He remembered every cold shoulder, every averted glance, and every cruel silence he had inflicted upon her based solely on the superficial judgment of his eyes. The brilliant young scholar, so eloquent in front of the king, was rendered utterly speechless. His pride was violently dismantled, replaced by the suffocating weight of a remorse that would haunt his conscience for years to come. The reaction of the mother-in-law was equally profound. Beholding the celestial beauty and the undeniable divine aura of Lady Pak, her former arrogance withered into intense embarrassment. She wept not out of joy, but from the sheer humiliation of her past cruelty, realizing how blindly she had mistreated a savior sent by heaven. Yet, Lady Pak demonstrated that her spiritual nobility far exceeded her physical transformation. She did not use her newfound power to exact vengeance or demand subservience. With quiet magnanimity, she stepped forward and offered her respects to her parents-in-law, accepting their trembling apologies with a serene nod. Yi Se-baek bowed deeply before his wife, formally acknowledging her true station as the matriarch of his heart and home. The cold exile of Pyeongdang had ended, and a new era of profound reverence began. A peace that the Yi family would desperately need, for the dark clouds of war were already gathering on the northern horizon. Within the walls of the Yi household, a serene harmony had finally settled, but outside, the geopolitical tides of the continent were shifting with terrifying velocity. To the north, the later Jin Empire had rebranded itself as the mighty Qing dynasty, a fierce warrior nation fueled by an insatiable ambition to conquer all under heaven. The fragile peace that Joseon had maintained was beginning to fray at the edges. While the royal court in Hanyang remained blissfully trapped in endless philosophical debates and bureaucratic hubris, Lady Pak looked toward the northern horizon with a heavy prophetic heart. Through her deep meditation and mastery of the cosmic arts, she could hear the subtle, rhythmic thud of thousands of war horses marching across the frozen rivers. She knew that a catastrophic storm was brewing, one that would soon test the very survival of the kingdom. Aware that Joseon possessed several brilliant strategists and noble ministers who might rally the nation in times of crisis, the Qing commanders devised a sinister plot of espionage. They sought to paralyze the kingdom from within before a single soldier crossed the border. To execute this covert mission, they dispatched their most lethal agent, a master assassin and sorceress named Giryong. Giryong arrived in the capital cloaked in a flawless disguise, blending effortlessly into the bustling markets and the outer fringes of the royal court. She possessed a chilling, hypnotic charm and a profound knowledge of poisons and dark arts. One by one, she began mapping out the vulnerabilities of Joseon's defenses, identifying key figures to eliminate, and sowing seeds of discord among the ministers. To To the untrained eyes of the royal guards, she was merely a harmless wanderer. But beneath her elegant exterior lay the cold, calculating mind of a serpent waiting to strike. It was only a matter of time before Giryong's dark mission brought her near the influential Yi estate, seeking to assess the strength of Minister Yi Deok-chun and his rising son, Sibek. As the spy approached the outer gates, she maintained her perfect illusion, confident that no mortal could pierce her supernatural veil. However, as she drew closer to the rear garden, the air grew violently dense. From the quiet threshold of Piwadang, Lady Pak had already sensed the foul, discordant spiritual energy entering her domain. Without stepping outside, Lady Pak unleashed a wave of divine aura that acted as a mirror of pure truth. The moment Jiryong crossed into the garden, she felt an invisible, crushing weight slam into her chest. The magical disguise protecting her began to fracture and dissolve, exposing the dark, weaponized talismans hidden beneath her robes. The assassin realized with a sudden surge of panic that she was no longer the hunter, but the hunted, caught in the web of a power far greater than her own. What followed was a fierce, invisible duel of wills. Jiryong attempted to draw her concealed daggers and unleash a swarm of deadly curses, but Lady Pak merely raised her hand from within her pavilion, manipulating the very fabric of the wind and earth. Roots rose from the ground to bind the assassin's limbs, and the air itself seemed to solidify, paralyzing Jiryong where she stood. Lady Pak did not choose to shed blood in her sanctuary. Instead, through the silent command of her spiritual energy, she systematically dismantled the spy's powers, stripping her of her dark talismans and her pride. She delivered a silent, chilling message into the mind of the trembling assassin, warning her that while Hoseon's corrupt politicians might be blind, its spiritual guardians were awake. Humiliated and utterly defeated without a single sword being drawn, Jiryong was cast out, fleeing back to the north to report the existence of the terrifying sorceress of Hanyang. Lady Pak urgently warned her husband and father-in-law of the impending invasion, but the arrogant ministers of the court chose to dismiss the prophecy as mere superstition, a fatal mistake that would soon drown the kingdom in fire. The warning signs had been ignored, and the cost of the royal court's hubris was paid in the blood of its people. In the bitter, freezing winter of 1636, the Qing dynasty launched a massive, lightning-fast invasion, their iron cavalry crossing the frozen northern rivers like an unstoppable avalanche. Joseon's defenses collapsed within days. The capital of Hanyang was plunged into a nightmare of fire and ash. The king and his ministers fled in panic through the blinding snow, seeking temporary shelter behind the cold stone walls of Namhansansong Fortress, leaving the rest of the kingdom defenseless. The air filled with the harrowing cries of families torn apart and the crackle of burning homes. It was a dark, apocalyptic winter where human dignity was violently erased by the cruelty of war, and a once proud nation was brought entirely to its knees. As the chaos breached the gates of the capital, the men of the Yi household rushed to the front lines to join the desperate defense, facing overwhelming odds and imminent defeat. Left behind in the sprawling estate, the remaining servants and family members shook with paralyzing terror as the smoke of the invading army drew closer. Yet, deep within the rear garden, Lady Pak remained the absolute center of tranquility. The hour she had prepared for during her long years of isolation had finally arrived. Stepping out onto the wooden porch of Piwadang, she closed her eyes and began to weave an ancient, celestial spell. With a slow, elegant gesture of her hands, she unleashed a wave of shimmering spiritual energy. Instantly, an invisible, impenetrable barrier materialized around Piwadang, sealing the pavilion and the surrounding trees away from the mortal realm. To the outside world, the sanctuary simply vanished into a dense, unnatural shroud of shifting mist and blinding light, creating a holy fortress that no weapon could pierce and no enemy could perceive. While the streets outside became a landscape of slaughter, a miraculous rumor began to spread among the terrified refugees fleeing through the woods. It was whispered that a hidden paradise existed near the mountain ridge, a place where the fires of the Qing army could not burn. Desperate mothers holding weeping infants, elderly citizens discarded by the retreating armies, and young maidens fleeing the brutal hands of invaders all stumbled blindly through the enchanted mists. The moment they crossed the threshold into Lady Pak's domain, the horrors of the war instantly evaporated. Inside the barrier, the air was warm, smelling of pine and fresh soil, completely untouched by the freezing winter wind or the stench of ash. The branches of the trees bent down to offer shelter, and clear water bubbled from springs that had long been dry. Lady Pak received these broken souls not with grand speeches, but with a silent, profound compassion, providing food, warmth, and absolute safety to thousands who had lost everything. Outside the perimeter of Pyeongdang, Qing scout units and heavy cavalry roamed the area, searching for remaining Joseon nobles and looking to plunder the wealthy estates. Time and again, enemy soldiers marched directly toward the Yi property, their blades drawn and eyes gleaming with malice. However, the moment their horses approached the boundary of the mystical mist, a sudden, violent disorientation gripped them. The terrain shifted before their eyes, trees appeared to move, and the pathways dissolved into labyrinthine illusions that sent them riding in frantic, terrified circles. The heavy iron boots of the conquerors could not find traction on the sacred soil, and their arrows flew harmlessly back at them, deflected by the unseen shield. Lady Pak stood as a silent vanguard, ensuring that within her circle of grace, the innocent remained untouched by the savagery of men. But she knew this quiet stand was only the prelude, for the main Qing army, led by their most ruthless generals, was drawing near, and a final, explosive clash of powers was now inevitable. The Qing army, flush with their rapid victories across the kingdom, eventually turned its sights toward the singular, impenetrable mystery that had eluded them, the mist-shrouded sanctuary of Pyeongdang. General Yeongol-dae, a man whose ambition was as vast as the northern plains and whose arrogance had never known defeat, personally led a vanguard of his most elite cavalry to raise the hidden dwelling. He viewed the persistent rumors of a sorceress not as a threat, but as a challenge to his military supremacy. As his forces thundered toward the Yi estate, the general scoffed at the whispers of his scouts, who spoke of disappearing paths and shifting terrain. He was a man of steel and blood. He believed in the tangible reality of the sword, not the ephemeral phantoms of folklore. He arrived at the edge of the sanctuary with a sneer, convinced that a single command would shatter the illusion and bring the occupants to their knees. The general's hubris was met with a silence so profound it felt like the breath of the world held in anticipation. Lady Pak stood atop the pavilion, no longer a woman hiding in the shadows, but a force of nature channeling the ancient rhythmic pulse of the earth itself. She did not raise a sword, she raised a hand, and the atmosphere around the invading army curdled. Suddenly, the skies tore open, not with rain, but with a tempest of paper talismans that ignited into searing, spectral fire. The ground beneath the Qing cavalry liquefied, turning the solid earth into a treacherous mire that swallowed hooves and armor alike. A whirlwind of razor-sharp leaves, each imbued with the weight of centuries of resentment, tore through the ranks of the soldiers. It was not a battle of men, but a systematic dismantling of an army by the elements themselves. Lightning, guided by Lady Pak's iron will, struck the banners of the Qing commanders, reducing their symbols of conquest to scorched ash. General Yeongol-dae, once the terror of the northern borders, watched in paralyzed horror as his invincible forces were rendered helpless. The very air had turned against them, pushing them back with an invisible, crushing weight. He felt the gaze of Lady Pak, a gaze that looked through his armor, through his rank, and directly into the hollow core of his pride. Recognizing that he was facing a power that transcended the laws of war, the general's spirit finally broke. The remaining soldiers, shivering in terror and overcome by a primal, inexplicable dread, threw down their weapons and fled, abandoning their pride and their mission. The terrifying sorceress had spoken without a word. The invaders were not just defeated, they were erased, their confidence shattered, and their will to conquer evaporated in the face of a dignity that refused to be subjugated. When the war finally ceased and the echoes of steel faded, the kingdom lay in ruins, struggling to draw breath. Yet, the story of the Lady of Pyeongdang remained, a singular, defiant flame that had burned bright through the coldest winter. The king, Upon learning of her miraculous defense and the countless lives she had preserved within her sanctuary, issued a royal decree of unprecedented honor, acknowledging her not merely as a noblewoman, but as a guardian of the nation. Within the Yi household, the transformation was absolute. The cold resentment of the past had long since dissolved into a deep, somber reverence. Lady Pak remained the pillar of the family, her wisdom guiding the clan through the arduous years of reconstruction. She did not seek to be a legend, yet her name was carved into the collective memory of the people. Her life became a testament to the fact that greatness is not found in the superficiality of appearance, but in the iron strength of the soul, and that even in the darkest hours of history, the power of a single unyielding spirit can hold the line against the encroaching shadows.